buenos días a todos. Vamos a presentar un poco el acto del día de hoy, el segundo día de los EESEDAYS. De momento, muchas gracias por el día de ayer. Estuvo genial todo el acto, la recepción de todos vosotros y las ponencias de toda la gente que habló. Y pues de momento eso, dar muchas gracias por todo el día de ayer y daros la bienvenida al día de hoy. Y vamos a introducir la primera ponencia del día. Voy a introducirlo en inglés para que se entere. I want to welcome Ilse Meulendijks. I forgot the last name. She's the master of the MA degree on the Design Academy of Eindhoven, and she's the founder and creative designer of Studio Juxta. So give a very warm welcome to her, please.
Last October we had a speech by him, and there was actually a joke made about how he would say Meulendijks or Meulendijks, so you will remember my name because it's so complex. And that's also why I decided to work under the name of Studio Juxta, because that's a little bit more approachable. But it's I think you can't create a more Dutch name, because technically it means a mill on a dike, so I mean in that sense it's like super Dutch. Anyway, so my name is Ilse Meulendijks. Very good and well done on your pronunciation. I'm the head of the master program at Design Academy Eindhoven. That's also a school for design. And I will tell you today a little bit about my practice, but also a bit about design research. That's what we talked about before, to shed some light on it, how we approach it in the Netherlands, where we are based in Eindhoven. Eindhoven is a little town, and we have our students coming there. So what we say at the Design Academy is, with the master's program, that we are designing design. Design Academy is a school with around 750 students, so it's quite small. I think that, yeah, here the school's also a little bit in a similar number. Yeah. So, and that's really nice, right? Because you can create a community and really work together, and that is always a good thing. Our students, when we have open days, we always joke that it's really nice to be in Eindhoven, because in Eindhoven there is not a lot to do, so there's a lot of time to focus on your studies. So we have a bachelor program and a master program. The bachelor is around 500 students, the master around 200, and we have a diversity beyond. I always love making the list of what are our main nationalities, because I think around 5% is Dutch, and that's in the top 5 of the main nationalities. So you can imagine that the list underneath is just one of a lot of different cultures together. And this is really an important item to us also, because I think that study is not just about a teacher and a professor coming here and telling you the truth of, if you just do this and replicate it, you will become a great designer. I think design is not like that. It's about finding your own voice and your niche and where you want to work in. So it's about the cultural dialogue that you also have with each other in the classroom, and that there's a culture of generous exchange. So this is a bit the environment that we work in right now. We're going to also move. So in 2 years we're going to be in a different location, which is very sad because we like this building, but it's also exciting because we can rethink what a school should look like in nowadays. Last year, Nicolien Dorsman gave a talk also about a bit of our program and about the way that we work. I try to build upon this so that I don't repeat too much. And she also shared already that you had a really exciting program yesterday, so I will try to also talk a little bit back about some things that also I heard happening there. So designing design, what does that mean? In the bachelor program you learn how to design, and in the masters we say, okay, let's see that the object is already there. So we don't really focus on creating an object per se, or in the siloed way of thinking. So fashion design, surface design, we don't really use those terminologies. We have different kind of terminologies to break a little through these silos. So let's just think. In the bachelor's you learn how to make a cup. Now at the master's program this cup is already there. So we're thinking, what does actually this cup now mean for design itself? And designing design is all about context. So the world that we live in and the world that we operate in. And I would like to ask now, maybe because it's so much more comfortable always when you sit in the back, but for me it's so much more difficult to see you. So I'm going to do this terrible, annoying thing to ask the people that are in the back if they could come a bit more to the front. Oh. Just arrived here with the train, so you have all these things from the morning still in your head. I want to do a little bit of an exercise together, okay? Because when we talk about context, we need to also think, what do we actually mean with that? So this is the world. We know the world, everybody knows the world, and we want the world to be in balance. At the moment, the world is not really in balance. And for example, we're dealing with a lot of technological challenges. So I would like to ask everybody that feels that technology and AI is a bit scary and that they're actually scared about it, could you please stand up? That's already quite a lot of... And it's interesting, you don't have to stand up if you don't want to, but this is something that is... Okay, so that's one. Then I have a second one. The second one... Everyone that thinks that the world is being tarnished by fire and water, and I know that that's going on in Madrid, can you also please stand up? So if there's a fear for the external material and the climate change challenges that we're facing, okay, there's still some people that think we can deal with this. Social, political, that is the last thing. Who has a fear of that the social and the political is going to disrupt what is going on and what we're dealing with? Okay, this was the last convincing for the one person that was still sitting down. Yeah, and there as well. Well, I think we can all conclude that we are very scared about what's going on in the world, right? There's a lot of things that are having an impact. Thank you very much for going with me through this exercise. Okay. So what I want to talk with you about is about sphere of influence. Because I think a lot of people that start to engage with design or that study design or are designers do actually have these big questions of wanting to change something, right? Designing is giving shape to the world, but this world is on fire. So how do we deal with this? And that's what I wanted to take some time about, because it's a question that I have in dealing with all the professors and the tutors and the department heads on how do we actually create a curriculum where our students are able to still create when all these factors from external are so big and so big upon us. So sphere of influence. And this is also something that's coming from Donna Haraway, who I appreciate very much. She has a book that she wrote that's really about your scope of influence and sitting with the trouble. So it's about how to actually dealing with that. During the presentation, I'm going to give some examples of our students that did work. And Daniel Parnitske is, for example, a student that graduated in social design. And he said, okay, maybe when everything is going wrong with all the scarcity and all this world burning, can I find a space where for me there's actually also some lightness with it or some pleasure? That we can at least share food, eat, and talk about the problems, but we still find each other and find community to be with each other and to face it together rather than alone. So he's still doing this. Now he's actually doing a project where he's creating these huge bonfires to also replicate a burning world, but then at the same time also having talks, having drinks around them, and just finding each other to create a space together. So in the Masters we do a lot of design research, but design research is a very contaminated term. So if you ask somebody from the industry or if you ask an academic what is design research, the possibility that you get a different definition is very, very big. So I think in our case what we actually often talk about is artistic research. And artistic research is introducing creative interventions in a designed path that you create. Also because design research has been contaminated by design thinking. And design thinking is something that's been highly capitalized. I see some people laughing about it. But it's been highly capitalized by the market. It's a set methodology to work through. And then if you just put enough post-its on the wall, you're going to get a solution that's going to let you think outside of the box, and then everything is going to be fine. But I think we all know as designers that it doesn't work that way. We see how modernism has set this type of mass-produced kind of way of thinking if we just follow a certain path that we get to an end goal. But that's not the case, especially not if this context is constantly changing and introducing new things. So when we talk about research in that sense, let's see it as an open path, because I think the strength of a designer is to be able to adapt, and therefore artistic research is much more what we engage in. And something else that we often say is that we research through designing. So before, let's say again, that analogy of the cup, so you learn how to make that design. Now we say, okay, by making a lot of cups, what can we learn from actually doing that process? So if we have already done a bachelor, know how to make that, and we have some practice in the field, so we've worked with the industry to produce, so we have other elements as well, like scale or the politics behind where you produce something or not. That's something that is then also giving us information. So how through the of designing are we also researching? Someone who has done that was one of our students, Christoph Wimmer-Ruland. He used the way of speculative design. So speculative design is that we make a future where we imagine how it will be like. So his one was really the post, well, how would we say, the current climate changes. He said, everything has gone, we are not able to actually produce anything anymore. So all the machines stopped. What are we left with then? And there's a lot of molds, plastic molds that are made to reproduce other objects. So what he's done is that he cataloged and made a whole archive of what are all those types of molds, and he started to design with those leftover products to also see, okay, would our aesthetic culture change if that is the case? So what if I assemble all the things that are left when the machines stop and create an alternative reality? So for him, it was a way to understand what aesthetics look like. I think that there's also a lot of sort of post-punk kind of aesthetics that come up because there's a material used to assemble and put it together. But it gives an idea about what would the future then look like. A little bit about me, because I thought to give you a bit more context about my background. I studied fashion, then I studied design, also at Design Academy, so I'm very much a Design Academy product. And with my graduation, I went to Greece, in Athens. I lived there for around 3 years. Then afterwards, this is like a fast one, I'll take a little bit longer journey, but I became the head of the master program, and recently I graduated with an executive MBA, so I went to the bad side of things. These books for me in Athens were a way to actually researching through designing. So you have this thing within design research that you would work through a MacGuffin. Is there anyone who knows what a MacGuffin is? Yes. Okay, don't worry, I won't ask you to describe it. But a MacGuffin is a tool. Hitchcock actually designed that in his movies that he made in the 60s. And to give an example is Pulp Fiction. That movie, do we know Pulp Fiction? Maybe the younger audience don't necessarily know that, but Pulp Fiction is a really cool movie, so if you haven't seen it, watch it. But there's this golden suitcase in the film, and it opens, and every time when it opens, there comes this glow out of the golden suitcase. You never actually find out what is in this golden suitcase, and also no one really remembers this golden suitcase. We remember the whole story, but this object was just a conversation starter or a starter of the story. Books were, for me, that way. So books were a way for me to research how knowledge and production economies work. So the Netherlands says that it's a knowledge economy, but I think by being that, we export our production, and that means that we also slowly export our knowledge. But we don't really talk about that. And I think that the Netherlands, in that sense, is quite behind on countries that have a very strong production economy, because they are able to learn through the doing. So this was for me the way to figure out, okay, so who's working in Athens, who are these people? There was also the crisis going on, so there was a lot of stigma on who are Greeks. So in this way, I tried to give a different image and a different portrait of who people are. And I also started a publishing house so that I was able to really create books, and I'm still doing that right now. So I moved back to the Netherlands, still working with all these amazing people. From that came Design Academy Eindhoven. They called me back. They said, okay, Ilse, you know now something about books. Could you make some books for us? So that was the first step. And then I started to work with the masters to also coordinate for them. And that was a great way to work next to my practice. That's also my tip to when you just graduate, first get yourself a coffee job, like work in something that doesn't take a lot of headspace, and just have a side job so you can focus on your practice, and then see what way you want to go. And then afterwards, if there's an opportunity with a job that you really like to do that consciously, but give yourself also some time to digest all the things you learned and what you would like to build your practice upon. Because what I noticed is that also already in Design Academy Eindhoven, I was seeing a lot of my fellow classmates that were making beautiful objects. And I loved watching that and seeing that and thinking, they are much better at it than I am. I actually like to use the questions that we have to make a chair and apply them somewhere else. So what if, as a designer, I start working in an organization and that I actually ask the questions that the designer asks, but then in a different context. So secretly, I'm also on a second mission at Design Academy to test this hypothesis and to see where it is going to take me. So besides that I have this job, I'm also very much learning how we deal with the individual in relationship to groups, but also that knowledge production that I was talking about before, like how on a global scale do we deal with so many diverse students, the political systems that are changing. So that's something that's interesting me a lot. And still I do my own projects and presentations about them. So I make wallpapers about the refugee crisis to see how images that are used in news media, how they represent the ideology of a state. These are very big words, so don't worry if you're not following too much, but it's just to show you that I have a little bit of different work as well. If you would like to know something about it, I can tell you after. I do some identity work, it's graphic work for a city planner in Eindhoven, for example. And then I went back to class to study executive MBA. And that's basically the study that people do when they are in their mid-careers, the step before they become a director. And I was doubting between anthropology or doing this weird study. I realized that anthropology is something that's really a passion of mine. So I would read all the books already. And then I thought, but these people that are actually ruling the world in their big jobs, how do they actually look like? So I thought, what if I go as an anthropologist into their world and see how they are actually schooled and how their training is going? So there I was. At that time, I had like a super punk fringe and my hair shaved and all these, well, white men in their 40s were there with their suits, and I left in the classroom. I was like, hi. All right, so I totally made a mistake. That was my first thought because I felt really the odd one in the group. So what I did after the first day, I actually told them that. I told them in the group, we had a sort of checkout, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna just say it. I said, okay, so I think I'm wrong here, maybe, but maybe I can also learn a lot from you. But I am gonna say that I thought I'm gonna be here as an anthropologist, seeing how you are going to have your studies and I'm just going to observe you. But if I do that, I become the observant and I don't actually allow myself to be in the study. And then I put myself somewhere else than you, and I don't actually like to do that. So I'm going to hereby declare that I'm going to put myself on the same level as all of you and engage in this study. Well, and what happened afterwards was quite funny, because after every lunch that we have, or that we used to have one by one, they would come over for a walk, say, hey, can we walk together? And it was so great. We had really, I learned so much from them and the other way around. In the last session, there was one of my fellow students that said, Ilse, he doesn't let you ask your questions, this professor, I don't like it. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, my questions are always, A, B, C, D. But when you ask a question, you always take this non-linear route and you get into wherever, and then, you let me actually think in a completely different way. So that was a really big gift. And I think that that's something, here's a lot of like-minded people in the room. This is also sometimes an invitation to be able to go somewhere else and be aware of how who are asking different questions maybe than other people, and how important it is to keep asking those questions. So never stop doing that. Another point that I think one of my main insights is The Zen of Art and Motorcycle Maintenance is a book, and they say if a factory is torn down but the rationality which produced it is still left standing, then that rationality will simply produce another factory. So you can break down a factory, but if you don't break down the thinking behind it, it will just make a new factory. And that's what a lot of our governments and our systems do. So the patterns will just repeat themselves. There's so much talk about the system and so little understanding. So that for me is a main and a real driver in my work to think, okay, so what is now actually the complexity of these systems if we have to deal with all these large world problems and how we can address them? And I can't do that alone, right? So I think by being busy with a lot of these big questions is also creating a lot of anxiety, because it's often that I've been confronted with, you know, a lot of students that feel a lot of anxiety, but also in that business study, it was very scary to also see that they were just there saying, we have this huge problem in the world and we don't know how to solve it, so we have to do that together. So nature for me is really the place where I recover, where I restore, and also something that I consider part of my practice. So being there a day is sometimes something that I book to do in my agenda, because if I don't, I can't keep working. So it's that whole thing, if you really want to be able to love someone else, you need to love yourself. So you need to also take the time to digest things, and I do that in nature. And that's where we get also a bit to the theme of today, which is, for my talk, space for what needs time. So how do you create that? That takes a lot of self-management and checking in with yourself and understanding what's going on with all these feelings that you carry on the inside. Because there is this other thing going on, I think what we also talked about before, design thinking is very sexy. So a lot of people, as soon as they hear design, they think innovation, development, cool. There's this whole promise about what design can do. And when things are stuck, they think, oh, if we just think more out of the box, then we're able to solve the things. But sometimes I wonder if we actually not need to think more into the box. And Lucas Munoz, he's a designer also in Madrid. He told me that once when we were in a talk in Milan last year. He said, I think we should not think more out of the box. We should just think more in the box and reuse it in a different way. Because designers, what they can often do is that they are mediators. So we have the opportunity to make something readable, right? A designer can make something visible. Like, what's the information that we need to see first before we see what is it actually about and learn more. It's with all the graphics that we see in a space. So it's helping us understand what is important and what is not. So we make little connotations in a thing, and there's a lot of power in there, right? We make connections between things. We say this and that needs to be connected, and you did not think about that before. So that is really great. There's a lot of synergy in there. And that's, I think, also what a lot of our students do. So, for example, Dan Overgaard, he had already a previous study when he came in the master's program, and that is that he was a chef. So we have a lot of interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary practices as well. And instead of trying something completely new, he started to build upon the practice that he already had. So what he did is that he started to research how seeds of plants that are not commonly used anymore, how they are archived. So he dove into these archives and then started to grow these seeds again, these old seed banks of forgotten knowledge. And then he started to cook with them. So, and by cooking and creating dinners, he invited people to let them taste types of apples that we don't produce anymore because they are not really in the commercial value kind of way of mass production, but they have a lot of extraordinary flavors that we might not use. So he's being a mediator between an archive and a specialist knowledge and an audience, and bringing them together and creating a bridge. And he did not decide on a new practice, but he looked at his own tool belts of what are the tools that I already have, and how can I, considering the context where I work in, take people along with me. And why he wants to do that is because he wants to introduce or have an effect on the shifting paradigm. The paradigm, that's the word for how we, at the moment, make sense of things. So a paradigm is a collection of all the systems and the structures that we operate in. It's a way to give meaning to things. And a shifting paradigm is the transfer of all these systems that needs changing with each other. And often our students want to impact that. And by doing that, they want to make sense. They want to make sense of what's going on in the world, and they use often design to make sense. So ZQ, she's a student that recently graduated in the Critical Inquiry Lab. And she saw that the United Nations, or the UN, what they said about Mongolia, a place that she feels very affiliated to, is that there was a lot of saying that the herders that were grazing the land, or that they were walking around in the land, that they were the problem of the climate change issues. So they were taking too much of the land in order for it to be able to grow well and do well. But she was wondering, I don't actually think that that's the case. So what she did is that she researched how on social media there was a lot of information produced, right? With everybody with their phones, but also with the herding people that were there. And she started to build a narrative, a story, as a video, to show that that was actually not at all the case of what was going on. There was a completely different reason for the climate change. And she could see that through the phones of all these other people that were recording there. So when we talk about context, is that we don't always have to go there. We can also stay in our own places to make sense of things through other lenses and other eyes. And their technology can be really a great tool. So to talk a little bit about what the master's program is, it's a 2-year program with different types of pillars in there. So autonomy, curiosity, intuition, positioning, methodology, knowledge, skills, and mediation are main goals through which we journey our students. Autonomy is about the self. So it's about your own practice and what you bring. So for example, with Dan, with the student that was already a chef, don't start a new practice, but see what you already have and what you want to work around. Curiosity is the drive, so the thing that makes you move and what excites you. Often it's much easier to find your drive in the things that frustrate you. So whenever you find something difficult and not comfortable, there's a lot of knowledge in there because it's touching you on a deeper level. There's like this feeling with it. So listen always to the things that give you discomfort. Intuition is about your values. So that's why you check, okay, I don't like this thing because it's touching about this core value of mine that is actually about, you know, that I want people to be safe in this world. So it frustrates me when somebody is done harm because my core value is about that I want equality for people. So that's what I stand for. And that standing for is about positioning and taking stance. So we over and over and over ask our students, why, and why are you doing this? Why is not somebody else doing that? And it not necessarily means that we need a perfect answer. We need an answer that's authentic to the person where it's coming from. Because someone can say A and the other person can say B, but it makes sense to the values, the drive, the self, the person and the author, the person that's behind it, the designer that's behind it, that is telling the story. Methodology is the research path, so the road to which how you come. We spend a lot of time where the students are just designing their own path. With artistic research, there's an ability to design that own path that works for you, where it makes sense to you, rather than that you're walking through a pre-designed scientific research kind of path. So we dare our students to let them challenge that. Knowledge is about what we know so far about something. And with knowledge, there's also this question of embodied knowledge. Knowledge where what came from. Is this knowledge that was very a European central kind of way of how we thought of this? Or are there other cultures with a different type of knowledge that we haven't researched yet or tapped into? Do we need to stay with these people for a while to actually understand what is going on if there's a different type of indigenous knowledge, for example? And skills is about giving form and navigating complexity. So the skills that you have already in your tool belt of designing, but also in how to navigate the complex questions that we're dealing with right now. And last but not least, the mediation, so inviting other people in, but also working together with an audience to let them be able to read the design that we are making and that we're working on. We do this through design projects, through theory workshops, writing. So a lot of writing is done because the students have to make a thesis or write a thesis as well. So that is working or writing and researching through writing. We have workshops, lectures, but mainly we focus on a culture of dialogue. And with the culture of dialogue, what I mean is that there's a lot of talking about it. So again, this idea of that we don't just have tutors that come in to tell you the truth. There's a lot of that everybody brings with them in their backpacks to talk about. And I think that that's what the promise of the school is really about. It's about taking the space and being here together. And that's why I also so annoyingly asked in the back to come to the front, because it's also a way of creating respect for each other, right? Like knowledge exchange and being there in participating in a dialogue. And it's important conditions to be able to develop together. So there's 3 modules in the first year, and there's 3 modules in the second year. Experimentation and design studios is part of module 1, so that is breaking loose from the old structures of how we work. Also because we noticed that some students come from very different type of backgrounds, so much more of a scientific way of dealing with things, so then we need to break a bit loose from the old structures. We have the second module that's about voice finding and navigating complexity. So what's the story that you want to tell? What are your fascinations about? What are you're excited about? Module 3 is the groundwork thesis proposal. So that's where you start researching what you want to spend your second year on. And the second year is really fully committed to one project. So one research project, and the students have a lot of time for that. And that's also the module where we collaborate with partners in other institutions, which I know is happening here as well a lot. There's a lot of value in there because design doesn't really operate as an individual thing. It's always together with something else. So that's why it's so important to collaborate, even when you're so comfortably in your bubble of being in school. It's a moment that we step out of that bubble for a little while. Then module 4 is the thesis research period. I always find that the most boring part of the year, because then all the students are in their own bubbles and they're not to be found in the school because they're all researching either in different places back in their home countries or in the Netherlands, but it's really sitting down and doing some proper writing. And then in the 5th module, it's the moment where we move from the head to the hands and start making prototyping and seeing how and what kind of installation the work can be. So, and that's often happening with the students, is that the work that comes out of the research is not necessarily an object that you can use for something. It's often an installation or a movie or something that is interactive. And then module 6 is the dissemination of the design project. Dissemination means the reproduction, so the way that you can see it. So that's where the design gets a body and is finalized for the graduation show. So this culture of generous exchange and care is really important to us. So a couple of years ago, to give an example, we worked together with the National Health Care Institution, GGZ they are called, and we asked them to reformulate a question which for them was mental health for all, which we found very exciting also as a school, because we really know that as soon as we ask the students a question, the first institute that they run into is, of course, Design Academy Eindhoven, so the critical questions also come to us. So what happened is, because we started to talk about mental health for all, the students are also asking, okay, but what about us here in this space? What does that mean for us? Because you don't have psychologists available, but we're dealing with a lot of our fascinations, and our fascinations are sometimes also rooted in trauma. There's so many layers underneath it. So what social structures or what supportive structures as an institute do you organize? And this is, I think, something that I would like to say. All of these frustrations that you feel often go to it. I see my job very much as that I think that our pillars should be shaking. If they are not shaking, we're doing a terrible job. So in that sense, it was a very good outcome that we were working on these questions that are brought in by an external partner, but also reflective to us as an institution. And the partnerships are also creating a space for the students to already create their name and start to become already part of a community, or enter already a practice and make already a voice. And in the first years, often the projects that they research, they also use that as a starting point for the second year. There's a lot of community things going on also. So Elevator Radio is the radio station that the students of the school wanted to start. It's a completely student-led project. We have quite a lot of those. And every year we try to go to Milan, to the design fair there as well. And then 2 years ago, actually, this group, the whole fair was around them. So they did a radio show in Milan at the Luna del Mobile. We had at satellite stands, and they would record back to us what was going on in the fair and have a live line with our students there. And that was just great, because it's not just, you know, these things are sometimes where a school is showing what they're about, but for us it's also a learning opportunity of what should a fair look like these days. Do these big fairs of how commerce is presenting, you know, their tables and their chairs, should that still exist? So those were also the questions that our students asked. We organize our education in 5 departments that our students can choose. So when I go back to that idea of the cup, so in the bachelor's you learn how to design a cup, right? So in the master's the cup is already there. So contextual design is actually thinking, okay, so what is the relationship between this cup and its surrounding area? So from a material perspective, but also from cultural heritage kind of perspectives, how does this cup say something about the environment that it is in? Social design is much more looking through a social lens. So how does a human interact with this cup? Is this cup a drinkable cup, but is it only approachable for humans, or does a bird also need to drink from this cup? If that's the case, how do we make sure that the bird doesn't drown? There's 100 different questions then to be asked. Information design is about the reproduction of this cup on an information kind of level. So we all know those IKEA kind of brochures where you reassemble your own things. That's, for example, information design. So how you go through those things. But now with technology, there's also these large language models, big data. Who is reading then that big data, and who is introducing and influencing the reproduction of this cup? Geodesign is thinking of it through a geo level. So what if we're working with contaminated clay? What if the clay in the soil that we use to produce this cup is not anymore safe to be used? Or what if the geopolitical conditions prevent us from actually being able to produce this cup? And Critical Inquiry Lab, our smallest department, but very strong, is asking, what is this cup doing here anyway? So they are always the critical bunch that asks these questions about, okay, so but why? That's basically what they do. And every department has a department head that we work with. So on the left is Afaina de Jong, she's head of contextual design, Nadine Bota, Marco Ferrari, who's part of Studio Folder, is an Italian studio, maybe some of you also know him. Patricia Reed, she's a researcher and head of the Critical Inquiry Lab. And Meta Haven, that's Daniel and Vinka. They are together, Meta Haven, they have a graphic design practice. They had also an exhibition in Bilbao and the Guggenheim not so long ago, I think last year. They had the geodesign department. And there's a lot of tutors, of course, that are part of our school. Often our tutors all have a practice in the field of design one way or another. And I called them a community of learners because our tutors are just as well learning. But they're also helping out with the sense making in our education. And to give a couple of highlights, Marga Wijmans, for example, on the left, she is, I think this thing I can also, oh look, cool, I always like that about these things. Marga, she has a fashion design practice, so she's bringing that into the contextual design program. Let me see, Henriette Waal, she just made a book about water and the politics around water. So she's creative for making an overview of all projects related to water streams and thinking about water in a holistic way that she often has a lot of projects about. She's also connected to Atelier Luma, that's in France. That's quite a known place as well. Vera Sacchetti, she's also teaching in a couple of departments, so she's not just in information design. She's an Italian curator, thinking a lot about democracies and how the policies behind a democracy is working. And through this lens, she researches quite a lot. So it's a lot of people that work all over and that come in for a temporary period of time and support in the sense making. And again, what I mentioned before, our students don't necessarily just make a design object as an outcome, but they often use the design as a way to research. So another example is that Floor, she had this installation where she was weaving, because she is a weaver. But what she was really fascinated about is about how AI and large language models, how they are built and how we are almost, as a consumer, not having any understanding of how they are built. So what she did was, through the practice of weaving, making an installation where you can see how the data is actually created, because in the end it's all ones and zeros, and that is creating the code. So the TV screen that you see there on the back, you can actually see the code behind it, that's then also, I think, making images. And it's for her a way to learn through making that weft and also having the conversations around it with the people that she's working with, to get more understanding and create more knowledge around how AI is, or these large language models, that's what I should say better, how that's coming to be. David's project I also would like to show, because they did a research into heartbreak and about taboos. So our students, when they're starting these research projects, often also start with something that's very close to them. And what they said is, okay, so I think that still a lot of people are not understanding how much a heartbreak can actually influence how you are operating or living, and you don't see that with people. So he made this deck of cards that have all sorts of heartbreaks. So also nostalgia, but also in different cultures and how things are coming to be. So for example, saudade is also a very specific kind of heartache that, you know, in the Portuguese have in their language, and that there's words for certain types of heartaches that we don't actually even know sometimes. So he has these ceramic objects that he makes, and while making them with people, he's going through these conversations and with the deck of cards. And then he's now, after his graduation, talking with organizations and to see with them how he can address this in big organizations, because sometimes people burn out or they stop with being able to work and you don't even know why. And this is also a way to bringing these conversations to life in organizational settings. Yes, how are we doing? I am talking a lot. We're doing all right? Yes? You can still follow? I'm not talking too fast? Okay. If I talk too fast, you tell me. Oh, I have 5 minutes. I love that. That's great. Oh, okay, now I am going to talk fast. So motivation, that's eventually where we are going to, right? Motivation is the impulse that gives purpose or direction to start behavior. So it's in a conscious and in an unconscious level, the thing that drives us. And this impulse is something that I would like to challenge everyone that works in design always to think about, what's the impulse that drives me? Because if we go through the different contexts or concepts that I introduced before, it's the impulse in relation to the context that you operate in with an adaptive attitude, so how you can relate to different types of things that are going on, and an embodied knowledge of what is already there, to see, okay, where can I still find my driver to be able to engage with the world. And often students at Design Academy, they come with a lot of criticism. And criticism is the act of saying something bad or something that's negative, right? That's still the way that we are dealing or listening to criticism. But what I wonder is, I always think that criticism is a deep form of care. So it can also be a way of how to engage with the world and being open. So if we have that impulse, the context and the adaptation and this embodied knowledge, then how can we also add a certain intention that you want to set as a designer for yourself? So Giulia, they did that by looking at the concrete world, so how concrete is made. And concrete is becoming much more scarce and a very polluted material, sometimes at times as well. So what he created was a platform for people in the concrete industry that they could all find each other and talk with each other and see how to work with each other to deal with these solutions. So he had created a quite clear intention for himself, is to bring people together, but through information design, because that's his tools or his, what he wants to work with. So that's where I come back to the promise of design, because I think that there's a lot of promises in there, and design is really a great, great tool how to engage with the world and to engage with problem solving or finding solutions, find a problem space and to go and stand into that and to see how you can develop from there. And in that sense, I would like to say, try not to design for, but to design with. So that you are always engaging, that when you make a chair or a table, that you always understand who is using it, in what way are they using it, is it approachable enough, is it for many, or if it's just for one, then it could be also the best way of how it's designed then for one. And what I would like to ask all of you is to also think about, okay, so if I close my eyes and I think back about that moment that we just stood up at the beginning of the session, where we were thinking about the fires and the rain that are becoming much more global problems, and all of these challenges that are really big, to also try to stay with them for a little while every now and then, and to feel the grief that's part of that, and to feel the discomfort that's coming with it, but to listen to it and take it serious and see what you have as great tools that is also provided here in the school by all the tutors and the professors that are there, and check in with yourself, okay, every morning, so what's driving me, and to see where you can move forward. All right, so that was me for today. And I think with my 5-minute sign, I don't know if there's still some space for having some questions.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was accounted for. Don't worry.
This is such a great sign. I think it's super.
So, thanks a lot, Ilse, for the talk. We're going to do a quick round of questions. Vamos a hacer preguntas. Si las queréis hacer en inglés bien, y si no, traducimos sin problema. O sea, si alguien tiene, por favor. Nadie tiene...
Okay, hi Elsa, nice to meet you. I really like your talk, but I'm interested in what moves you and what have you designed, and if you have designed something that has changed someone's life.
Have I designed something that changed someone's life?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I feel something going on the inside immediately when you say that, because I think I would never make the statement of saying that something changed somebody else's life. I think that that's something that you have to ask the people that I worked with or designed something for. At the moment, I work a little bit more in strategic design. So what that means is that I work now, to give an example, 1.5 years ago, I was asked by a large healthcare institution in the Netherlands that they have very critical care. So if they don't take care of a person for a day, that person will pass away. Like, it's really critical and lifelong. And together with their board, I sat down and said, okay, so they wanted to rethink the way that they're working right now. And they also have this challenge of having to work with the resources in a different way. So we organized sessions where that created a new strategic plan for that organization. And then half a year later, the director called again and he said, okay, can we also maybe do some seminars and talks for the management layer? Because it's not just about what we decide at the top, but Amarant, that's the name of that organization, is really a large one. Can we also introduce a different way of thinking and that checking in with yourself and seeing where your scope of influence is with the rest of the organization? So now I'm having these talks and these designers that are in my network that I ask them to come to show their practice and that we organize sessions with them. So my work has become a little bit less material. So the wallpapers, for example, they were a very concrete object. Like I would design the object, and those wallpapers were that when you stood far away, they looked like very cozy wallpapers, but when you stood very close, you could see a very difficult scene going on at the same time. Like I would say that on an individual level had much more of an impact of making people aware of a problem. But those types of works, they started to frustrate me a little bit because I was also thinking, okay, now what? So I made this person aware and he said, oh yeah, I never thought about it. You know, I had the central location of a big design fair in Eindhoven during the Dutch Design Week. And every time that was the outcome, oh yeah, I never thought about that this way. Nice, and then they walked away. And I thought, yeah, but now, what?
Yeah, like you point the problem, but the problem is not fixed.
Exactly.
So
yeah, and I think
it's still there.
And what I love about your question is that that's actually tapping into this, right? So how can we really change this paradigm or create an actual shift? And that's something that's really difficult to measure because I don't know what the impact is of the people that I work with in that sense. And that's also why this promise of design is sometimes really difficult. Like if you think about the design profession as a discipline, what we often do is that there's awards and things where we talk about all the great works or the things that are made because we need to show how important it is. But underneath it, it's quite difficult to do that. So yeah, I hope that the impact of, for example, these seminars now is that people start to think. And it's really interesting what's happening because now I'm having conversations with them and maybe I shouldn't say that. So let's keep it in here, what I'm going to tell you now. But what happens is that they are starting to ask questions, you know, okay, so there's a new strategic plan and there's all these things going on, but how much can I actually introduce a thing that changes? How much are I actually able to challenge the system, right? So, and then I think, because I'm an outsider, I think, oh yeah, it's great, you know, anarchy, woo! But yeah, for the organization themselves, it's quite difficult to manage that. So how is the follow-up design? When are people having next conversations? So yeah, I think that what is a challenge of also that mediation role, the mediator that the designer can be, is that it becomes too much of a consultant, so that you would come and you say something and then you leave again. I think if there's an opportunity to stay in a place where you designed something or when you made something, and that could be even, you know, if you have a design for a hotel. Like I had a conversation about that last week, that you see that often designers that design a hotel don't actually stay in the hotel. So they never actually experience if the lighting and the color that they use on the wall and is creating that ambience that they actually want. So I think that deep connection with the things that you create is really important. So I think also when you talk with a commissioner or with somebody that gives you a job, to always try to say, okay, but I'm gonna stay with you for this for a little while. And don't be afraid to just say, hey, now with the board member also, I'm telling him, I'm like, okay, I want to change my plan a little bit because I think we need to feel what's going on in the group. So, you know, that's also challenging because he has a schedule and an agenda and he doesn't have time for me. So the last couple of days I've been sort of trying to get hold of it. So, you know, these things I think are important. Does that answer a bit your question?
Yeah, I think it answers because you do like, I don't know how to say it in English.
What's the Spanish word? Maybe somebody can translate.
Una comparación, sí, como una comparación.
Like comparing two things, one next to the other?
Yeah. It's great, yeah. Okay, so
yes.
Studio Juxta, the studio name that I have. Juxta is actually from juxtapositioning. And what that means is that you put two objects together, or two images. And before image one had a story and image B had a different story, but because you put them together, they start to create a new story. That's what juxtapositioning means, and that's why I named my studio that way, because I like to work a lot with contrast or conflicts, and then putting them together and see what actually happens. And instead of thinking, oh, scary, I'm just like, okay, so what are we gonna do now? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your time and for being here.
Sure, thank you for your question.
¿Alguna pregunta más?
Hi. So I think that when you do a lot of experimental design, like you shown us and like you do in the DAO, I feel like we as designers sometimes face a wall, or maybe when we're deep in the project, when we're working and we have it in our mind, sometimes you realize that it's not going anywhere, but that maybe you have some concept wrongs, and yeah, you're like, I messed up and now I don't know how to continue or how to fix it, or maybe I'm starting to feel lost because I'm really deep into the subjective theme and I don't know how to work. And yeah, my question is like, how do you affront it from a point of view to keep motivated or to make a turn, to keep advancing and not locking up in a situation when you don't know how to keep working on the project?
Yeah. Oh, I thank you. Maybe we should do a little bit of a check. Who relates? Whoever feels like that, like they're stuck and don't know. What? Really? No one? Come on, right? There's a lot of that. So it's super good that you asked this question, because I think that was also a bit my intention to create space for this. And there's, I think, well, maybe a tip first, talk about this to a lot of different people, right? Because everybody has their own different ways. When I was after graduation from Design Academy, a couple of years into my practice, I started to think about how it is really funny that you can only make conclusions of something after a period of time. So I saw then a work of Picasso, and somebody was talking about the blue period of his work. And I was thinking, oh yeah, it's so funny because first he made one painting and yeah, it was blue. And then he made another painting, it was also blue. And then a third and then somebody probably said, you have like a lot of blue going on. I was like, yeah, probably, just feeling blue right now. And then another painting came and another painting. And then somebody said, okay, so this is a blue period. But probably he had to go through a lot of discomfort of just having feelings, putting them into work somewhere, and just creating more of it. And that discomfort that you're describing is sometimes so complex because you can see other people flowing through a process, but you're feeling that that's not for you the case. And last week I had a conversation with a student about this as well, that they're like, yeah, but the models that I'm being provided with, how I have to do research, they're not working, because people, when they are doing interviews, they're not giving me the truth. Why would they give me the truth? And now I have all this data and I can't really do something with it, and I don't know where to put it. And on the inside, I was smiling because I was thinking, this is great, because what the student is doing is that there's a lot of criticism going on. So criticism on having to use a methodology that she sees that's not having the right impact. So that's an invitation. Okay, so if the interview session doesn't work, then what else needs to be working? And very bluntly said, meditation, yoga, going to the sauna, and then, taking a cold bath afterwards, those are the things that work for me. So often when I feel stuck, I think I have to work more and work harder and produce more and sleep less and do la 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 la, but that's actually having the opposite effect. The best effect is that tree and that garden or that forest, and going in there and taking time away from the project. Because often the answers are somewhere inside you, but you're just not having access. And with schools, I think what is a challenge is that there's a lot of pressure, right? So you have this strict module setting, so you have to give a finals presentation and a midterm presentation. So we feel that pressure of time moving forward, but just taking a cold shower is sometimes much more of a solution than doing nothing about it. And I think being vocal about it, so talking about the discomfort, because when you say it to somebody else, and that somebody else tells your frustration back to you, it actually often lets you think about it in a different way. So then you start to think of it differently. So whenever you feel stuck, don't do the thing where you get more closer and away, and because that's what you feel on the inside, right? That's what you want to do, you want to shrink. But how can you actually have a growth mindset is by making sure that you talk about the discomfort and just letting it be there. Just write pages in the book. Think about what's your medium. Maybe it's dancing. Maybe it's you know, I don't know, something that gets you out of your system.
Okay, thanks.
We're gonna do a last question due to timing.
Hi, I'm sorry, I had to write it down because it's quite long.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you if you think that pursuing education outside of the design field, like your MBA, helped you somehow to grow into a more like versatile or well-rounded professional. And if you would also recommend us to try to expand our education outside of the design bubble.
Yes, big fat yes. Yeah. I think that what design has as a capability is that we're specialist generalists. So our speciality is that we are able to look generally to things. So when you are a carpenter, you are also able to probably make clothes. You're also able to make a lot of different things if you think about it in a conceptual way. So Design Academy in that sense is really conceptual, right? And I think that we have quite a lot of similarities with the program here. But I think that there's this great opportunity that we are able to holistically, so look at it from a total perspective. But that sometimes also makes it quite difficult to find your niche. So for that reason, it would be really good to go into other fields so that you can deep dive. So that you find that specialization afterwards. But it could also be the other way around. So thinking of a designer that we had in the master's, Vera van der Beug, she studied neurology before. And then she did a master's in design. And now she is seeing how large, also she's working with AI, and how AI is reading objects. So how AI is scanning for what kind of emotions that objects have, and she's doing a PhD about that. So she's working across a lot of different disciplines. And there's two answers that I would like to give. One is that design is not a discipline, I think, in my opinion. I think that that's the problem with design. Design is an attitude. It's a way of looking at the world. But that makes it quite a problem because a discipline needs to be designed that way for it to get funding, for it to exist, for it to say, okay, we think that this is this at this moment. But that's quite difficult if it's an attitude to look at things. So that's why it's good to connect to other industries, because then you start to also understand, and that's my second answer, where you are different in the way that you are. So when I was in my bubble with my design friends, I was thinking, yeah, how am I now really different? I don't really, I feel similar with my friends, you know. But then with the school, with the MBA, and all these people that were totally different than me, I think there I learned the most, because there I really found out that I think differently. And that I can celebrate that, and that I don't have to be afraid of it anymore. Because before I was always trying to be competing with people that were doing a similar thing, or not competing is not a good word, but you know, you're so in it that you get a bit stuck with it. So also that stuckness with work, it's sometimes really good to go the opposite and go really out of it and learn from people who think differently, also to understand, yeah, where you are different.
Thank you so much.
I'm not very good at giving short answers. I can tell you that. Long answer person.
Well, thank you so much for the talk, Ilse. For now, we're gonna have like a 10-minute break until the next talk. Thank you so much for coming and for everything.
Thank you for the space.